Greetings. This is Zeb from Cloverdale Church of Christ. As you turn to Philippians 1, I want you to imagine a scenario. Now, you have heard about some new idea and you think it can really change the world. And you have been pushing for this idea back before anyone else was, before you weren't the first person, but you were the one who people really associate with it. When a lot of people didn't even know it existed, you were pushing this idea. You've been here for a long time. And you really think that this would make the world a better place. You see the potential. It is criminally underrated. But you are very bold, and as a result of advertising your idea, you get thrown in prison. Maybe some industry pundits didn't like how you were upsetting the status quo and threatening them implicitly, their way of life. But for whatever reason, you end up in prison, and someone else comes along and he starts pushing for this idea. But what's more, he starts insulting you and deriding you for, oh, you're so incompetent, you got thrown in prison, and people flock to him, though your accomplishments exceed his by an order of magnitude or two. How would you respond to this? I know how I would respond to this, but let's see how Paul would respond to this. This is from Philippians 1:15. Some, to be sure, are preaching Christ even from envy and strife, but some also from goodwill. The latter do it out of love, knowing that I am appointed for the defense of the gospel. The former proclaim Christ out of selfish ambition rather than from pure motives, thinking to cause me distress in my imprisonment. What then? Only that in every way, whether through truth or pretense, Christ is proclaimed, and in that I rejoice. So Paul is showing grace and humility. Okay, well, that makes sense. After all, reputation is not really meaningful in the grand scheme of things, and it's not like anyone's making death threats at him until verse 20. Yes, and I will rejoice, for I know that this will turn out for my deliverance through your prayers and the provision of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, according to my earnest expectation and hope that I will not be put to shame in anything, but that with all boldness Christ will, even now, as always, be exalted in my body, whether by life or death. This is not how I would naturally respond to this. This is not the response I would normally expect. I mean, sure, Paul, you might be able to view everything from the perspective of the high heavens, but how are you supposed to expect us to do this? But Paul is not just pulling this out of the air. When we see Paul talk about this, it's not just his perspective. It is actually the perspective of Jesus. And continuing into verse 21, for to me to live is Christ, but to die is gain. But if I am to live on in the flesh, this will mean fruitful labor for me, and I do not know which I am to choose. But I am hard-pressed from both directions, having the desire to depart and be with Christ, for that is very much better. Yet to remain in the flesh is more necessary for your sake. Now, to live is Christ. What does that mean? Yes, Paul is living like Christ, but in order to have such a positive outlook, he also needs the mind of Christ. And from Philippians 2:5, it says, have this attitude in yourselves, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, although he existed in the form of God, did not regard equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself, taking the form of a bondservant and being made in the likeness of men. Being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Every impressive trait we read from Philippians 1 is ultimately a little version of this. I do not think any Christian in human history, after all, has ever had to descend from the heavenly realm and then become a poor and derided human being, subject to all the restrictions of human beings, which we don't have to deal, which without all the methods of dealing with them we have today, like supermarkets and plumbing and air conditioning, and then to die a disgraceful and humiliating death and a very painful death by bearing all the sins of the world. When Paul is acting in the way he is acting like Christ. So if we imitate Paul in Philippians 1, we are also imitating Christ. But then, how does Jesus do this? If I was in position, I will be open about this. I would not do that. And how does even Paul do the things he does? What even are Jesus and Paul doing? Looking through these passages, I cannot help but find a similarity. In fact, I believe that all of these passages are indicating the same thing. What do people often have their satisfaction shaped by? Maybe money and possessions, but maybe you don't really care about money. There is pleasure. Disney World, in rather dystopian fashion, markets themselves as the happiest place on earth. And people clearly believe them since they keep giving them their money and lots of it. Maybe you lean more into academia or perhaps accomplishments in sports or physique. Jesus and Paul know Ecclesiastes. They know the proper response, which is vanity of vanities, all is vanity. They know the true world-upending secret of true joy and satisfaction. They know that true joy comes from sharing and bearing the gospel. Paul's worldview has been fundamentally shaped to the point that he has become detached from the cares of the world, but he still is painfully aware that the world exists. When Jesus came, he did not eradicate all of the world's problems. We know this because problems still exist. What he did is provide a way to deal with them. Philippians 1:25, convinced of this, I know that I will remain and continue with all of for your progress and joy in the faith, so that your proud confidence in me may abound in Christ Jesus through my coming to you again. Paul knew that if he considered himself only, he would rather die. After losing a promising career as an esteemed Jewish scholar to perhaps the most tumultuous life in human history, he must have been getting fed up with the world, being human. But he simply didn't care that he was fed up when compared to his cares for other people that he would look for escape. Leaving the world and departing for Jesus would make him happy, but he knew that true joy comes from sharing and bearing the gospel. He did not have to enjoy pain. Jesus was sweating blood on the night of his crucifixion, and we know this was not a sin. But Jesus and Paul got up anyways and decided to do the next right thing. I believe that there is another passage that encapsulates this well, and I'll warn you, it's a bit controversial. I mean, if I say, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, but you are on my opposing basketball team and say, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, then which one of us is the heretic? I mean, either one of us will lose and be the heretic, or we'll tie and both be heretics. But if we interpret this passage in the way that we interpret Philippians 1:15 through 26, then neither of us have to be heretics. Because if we can do all things, then we can win well and we can lose well. We can get shipwrecked and beaten and imprisoned and insulted by other Christian teachers who should know better and put on death row and suffer all sorts of evil in Christ who strengthens us. We can put all these problems behind ourselves because we know that true joy comes from sharing and bearing the gospel.